This is the Ramana Maharshi Satsang, a time to listen, reflect, and deeply meditate. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. I'm not a teacher or a guru, just someone who loves this teaching and wants to share it with like-minded people. I'm reviewing and commenting on the book Talks with Ramana Maharshi, and this week is Talk 68. Let me bring it on screen. After years of discipline and practice, I'm having some mystic experiences, says a professor. I feel that sometimes that Bhuma, the supreme consciousness, is infinitude, and that I am finite consciousness. Is that correct? And the Maharshi says, Bhuma, perfection alone is. It is infinite. There arises from it this finite consciousness taking on anupadi, a limiting adjunct. This is abhasa, or reflection. Merge this individual consciousness into the Supreme One. That is what should be done. The professor turned to a lady seated just a little further away from him and interpreted in Hindi to her. And then she asked Ramana, what is the difference between meditation and distraction? And Ramana says, no difference. When there are thoughts, it's distraction. When there are no thoughts, it's meditation. However, meditation is only practice, as distinguished from the real state of peace. The woman asked how to practice meditation. Ramana says, keep off thoughts. The woman asked how to reconcile work with meditation. And Ramana asks her, who is the worker? Let him who works ask the question. You are always the self. You're not the mind. It's the mind which raises these questions. Work proceeds always in the presence of the self only. Work is no hindrance to realization. It is the mistaken identity of the worker that troubles one. Get rid of the false identity. She asks again how to practice meditation. Ramana says, keep off thoughts. And then the professor asks, is there knowledge in realization? And Ramana says, absence of knowledge is sleep. There is knowledge in realization, but this knowledge differs from the ordinary one of the relation of subject and object. It is absolute knowledge, meaning no difference between subject and object. Knowledge has two meanings, avacharatha, which is vritti, which is the literal meaning, and laksharatha, jnana, self, sarupa. This is the secondary significance. The professor says, with vritti, one sees knowledge, and Ramana says, Quite so. He also confounds vritti with knowledge. So this discussion with the professor, a longtime practitioner of meditation, begins. I feel sometimes that Bhuma, the supreme consciousness, is infinitude and that I am finite consciousness. Is that correct? And the Maharshi says, Bhuma, perfection alone is. It is infinite. There arises from it this finite consciousness taking on an upadi. This is abhasa, or reflection. Merge this individual consciousness into the supreme one. That is what should be done. So the professor says that at times in his meditation, he feels that the higher power, he calls it Bhuma, the supreme consciousness, is the vast, unlimited awareness, while also identifying himself as the finite consciousness. He makes this difference between himself and the higher power, the absolute consciousness. Ramana replies, cutting these ideas at the root, saying the higher power, the absolute consciousness alone is. This is the heart of Advaita Vedanta, the teaching of non-duality. Since absolute consciousness alone is, where is the room for anything else or anything other than absolute consciousness? Ramana declares no difference. Advaita declares no difference. And the learned professor starts his dialogue stating the difference he sees between himself and the absolute consciousness. So Ramana starts with breaking up this idea of difference, saying, Bhuma, perfection alone is. There arises from this finite consciousness taking on an upadi. This is abhasa, or reflection. Ramana says that in the infinite there arises something that seems to be finite. He doesn't explain how the finite rises. I've heard this described using whirlpools or vortexes or waves in the ocean as analogies. The finite rises as a reflection of the infinite. It is not infinite, but rather a limited reflection of it. It has no consciousness inherent to it. It just borrows a limited consciousness within the infinite consciousness. The concept of upadi is fundamental to Advaita. It means superimposition or limitation. It can mean appearance. An example is a crystal that appears blue when placed on a blue cloth. Another example is the reflected image of the sun that expands when the surface of the water expands and contracts when the water shrinks. It shakes when the water is agitated. It gets divided and seems like many suns when the water is divided. It participates in the qualities and conditions of the water, while the real sun is unchanging throughout. Consciousness, through the apati of the mind, takes on the appearance of the mind. So when the mind is agitated, consciousness seems as if agitated. When the mind is quiet, consciousness is clear. This is the basis for so much spiritual practice to quiet the mind and experience directly the clear consciousness as it is, without upadhis. Ramana is then asked about practice by a woman accompanying the professor. What is the difference between meditation and distraction? And Ramana says, no difference. When there are thoughts, it's a distraction. When there are no thoughts, it's meditation. However, meditation is only practice as distinguished from the real state of peace. Ramana says there is no difference between meditation and distraction. Consciousness is the same always. Distraction and meditation are only states of mind. Ramana, though, distinguishes the quiet of meditation, which is a state of mind, from the real state of peace. This state of peace is beyond the mind, not comprehended by the mind's cognitive processes. These see only the objective, only the limited, and this real state of peace is not limited, so it is not comprehended by the mind. Meditation is the best the mind can do towards deep knowledge to develop the mind's ability to concentrate and become quiet. The deepest knowledge is beyond mind. This is from being, not thinking, and direct knowledge as the thing, rather than indirect knowledge from the mind, knowledge of the thing. She asks next how to practice meditation. And Ramana says, keep off thoughts. Ramana says meditation is no thoughts. How to do this? There are so many schools of meditation which teach just this, how to quiet the mind. Ramana says, inquire. Inquiry, when you get past the mind that says, I am this or I am that, there is what seems like a silent blankness. This is as far as the mind can go. There are no thoughts here. When thoughts return, investigate and discover the identity at the base of the thought and inquire into that to see if that's really who you are. Do this again and again, and it will become a habit leading to a quiet mind. The quiet mind is ready for deeper knowledge. The dialogue continues with another question from the woman: how to reconcile work with meditation? And Ramana asks, Who is the worker? Let him who works ask the question. You are always the self. You are not the mind. It's the mind which raises these questions. Work proceeds always in the presence of the self. Only work is no hindrance to realization. If the mistaken identity of the worker that troubles one, get rid of the false identity. Once again, Ramana says the problem is not the action, but rather the identity. In this case, the mistaken identity of the worker. It is identity of the worker as the worker that interferes with meditation, not the work itself. The dialogue continues with another question from the professor. He asks, is there knowledge and realization? Ramana says, absence of knowledge is sleep. There is knowledge in realization, but this knowledge differs from the ordinary one in the relation of subject and object. It is absolute knowledge. Knowledge has two meanings. One is Vacharatha, vritti, literal meaning. The other is Laksharatha, jnana, the self, swarupa. With vritti, one sees knowledge, asks the professor, and Ramana says, quite so. He also confounds vritti with knowledge. And here Ramana talks about knowledge and identifies two kinds, knowledge of the mind and knowledge as the self. Knowledge of the mind is indirect, the knowledge of something as an object. Deeper knowledge is the direct knowledge that is knowledge as, not knowledge of. Ramana points to this when answering the question, how to practice meditation. Ramana says, keep off thoughts. The Sanskrit word vritti can be taken as a catch-all term for any content in consciousness, like a thought or a feeling. This defines vritti as a mental experience. The absence of mental experience is sleep. The difference between vritti and jnana is self-knowledge, where there is no difference, like no difference between subject and object, non-duality. Like the difference between subject and object, the seeker confuses mind and consciousness, ideas with reality. So the seeker continues to refine his mental knowledge, hoping to reach the self. The problem is that the self can never be reached by thinking about it. The only way the self is reached is by being the self and knowing yourself. This requires that you get past thought, meditation, inquiry, or any way you have that stops the mind's chatter, opens the door to deeper knowledge, knowledge of the self. Nome says, let your inquiry be non-objective. This is beyond the mind. So long as the mind is still active, you will not experience this non-objective view. So inquire, know the self, be the self. You are already the self. You just have to know what you are. And now we'll listen to my teacher Nome with a talk, Know Yourself.
That you should know yourself is the advice of all the wise. How can you know yourself when being is not an object? How can you not know yourself, your own being, which is consciousness, self-luminous? In his spiritual instruction, the Maharshi has pointed out, are there two selves that one should know or not know the other? Who is it that would wish to know the self? Or who is it that is subject to the illusion of ignorance and its consequent bondage, and who is desirous of liberation because he intuits it's his natural state? Without knowing yourself as you really are, what can really be known? If you treat the self as if it were an object to be attained or lost, to enter into as if it were a state, or to depart from as if you would come down from that state, to treat the self as if it were an object is delusive. The self signifies yourself. And all the teachings of the sages and scriptures that speak of the self, the absolute, are speaking of you in your real nature. What are you in your real nature? Your experience so-called, your knowledge so-called, of anything else depends upon the view of yourself, the definition of yourself. This is why Sri Bhagavan says in Saddarshanam, Truth Revealed, that it is only as long as the ego is taken to exist, there is the ego sense, will there be the threefold division of the universe, the individual, and the Supreme Self, or God. The three are not really three, he says. The division, the multiplicity, appears only so long as oneself is not known. The self, which is pure being, consciousness, bliss, is ever existent. It is non-dual, and it alone is. If that very same self is assumed to be, through the power of imagination, an individual entity or ego, then all illusion sprouts from there. Since it is illusion, it is not really existent, but it seems to be. If we want illusion to vanish and perceive reality in such a manner that reality comprehends itself, then we must know who we are. And how else to know who you are unless you question the very one that seems to be individualized even now? What is it that you refer to as I in yourself?
So now let's take a little time to inquire so you can experience what Ramana talked about. Get comfortable in your seat, quiet yourself, take a long breath in, feel your breathing, take a long exhale. And now notice that you exist and you know that you exist. And inquire, investigate within yourself. What do you know with the mind? Nothing but objects. Your mind knows objects. Are you an object? Does the mind know itself? What knows the mind? What do you know for certain? What do you know always? Who am I? What is the nature of my existence? All right. Now a short chant. Om Shanti, Shanti,
Shanti,
Shanti. Om. Peace,
peace,
peace, peace.
peace.
All right. Any comments or questions?
That was very profound. Yeah, really deep. Good. It's good.
Well, Ramana is like that.
Yeah, it is.
You know, that's one reason why I do these commentaries, because I think he's so deep and so terse that it helps to kind of take it apart a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, your commentaries definitely help.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Well, again, Doug, I feel like, you're the one who's been thrown in the deep end of the pool, but you seem to be okay.
I like challenges.
Well, to me, this is the only challenge that matters at this time in my life. And the challenge is to keep questioning all these stupid ideas that I have until I can get behind them and find out, what is the base. What is at the base doesn't have any questions. Just the mind. Now, one reason I start the meditation at the end with you exist and you know that you exist is that if you really tune in to that knowing you exist, then you're looking directly into this I thought. You know that you exist without thinking about it or feeling it, and it is this deep inner knowledge. Uh, Richard talked about that when he talked about his meditation as holding to the I. It is, exactly at how do you know that you exist? If you focus your meditation just on that question, I think that's enough. And it's when you focus on that question, you focus on the experience of how do you know that, not what you think about how you know it, the experience. Ramana said it's more akin to feeling than thinking. And I appreciate that he keeps giving us hints. If only I was smart enough to pay attention.
We're all in the deep end of the pool, but we're putting on the Ramana lifesaver.
Yes, yes.
I say we're all treading water.
Well, that's a lot better than drowning.
Going under.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so again, thank you all for coming together today.
Thank you.
And, I think these sessions are important.
They're wonderful.
Yeah.
And Namaste,
Yeah.
Namaste.
Thank you, Richard.
and we'll
Thank
see
you.
you next time.
Yes.